I have often said Monsanto is a polluter at many levels. It pollutes our biodiversity through genetic pollution. That is known and that's recognized. It's a polluter of the mind because it lies and lies and lies through what I call prostituted science. Not authentic science, not independent science, not real science, but prostituted science that speaks for money. And the third level at which it spreads pollution and corruption is by corrupting the very agencies that should be looking after citizens, their safety and their security.
Well, GMOs, genetically modified organisms, or genetically engineered organisms, as you call them in the US, these are life forms which do not exist on Earth. They were artificially created by using the so-called recombinant DNA technology. Since the genetic code is universal in Earth, all life forms use the same chemical units to pass on genetic information. That makes it possible to take genetic information from one life form and transfer it to another. For instance, you can take a gene responsible for cold tolerance from an Arctic fish and transfer it to a fruit or to any grain and create a cold-tolerant strawberries or any sort of life form really your imagination calls for. Now we are being told that it's exactly the same as traditional breeding, and it is going on since agriculture is going on, but it's absolutely untrue. There are several basic differences in the methods how these new life forms are created. First of all, with ordinary traditional breeding, should it be plant or animals or even humans, in the offspring only the genes of the parents are present. With this technique of genetic engineering, you can create, as I've told you, any life form and mix the genes of bacteria, fungi, viruses with humans or animals, or plant genes, indeed human genes with plant genes, and so on. Now, we were told that why do we worry about it? Because it's just a tiny little bit of DNA which enters to the host genome, and it doesn't really matter. But it does. We are also told that there are modern technologies to create mutagenesis and create novel sort of kinds of plants. But with mutagenesis, you change just one amino acid. You can't do more than that. With this genetic modification, you can put in entirely new protein or proteins with new characteristics. And of course, these artificial life forms, it's not created just lar pour lar for the sake of creating something new. Since they are non-existent in nature, they can be patented. So whoever owns the patent, owns the life form, makes money out of it and out of its use.
The CGIAR, the Consultative Group on International Agriculture Research, was set up some years ago by seed money from the Rockefeller Foundation and most of the large agribusiness companies. It grew out of their work in the Philippines, the International Rice Research Institute, which was set up with Rockefeller money. And now today they've brought in the World Bank and other transnational organizations into the directorate of the CGIAR. But in effect, this is a vehicle to train developing country scientists, to bring them into the places like US universities where the research is financed by the grain agribusiness companies. So they come back to their countries and promote GMO and think that this is the greatest advance possible in agriculture. It's much more effective to have a Nigerian or a Kenyan agronomist come back to Kenya and say, I've studied at the Rockefeller University in New York or at Berkeley in California, and this is the latest development in modern agriculture, genetically modified seeds. And then they become the ambassadors to promote this poison in the developing world. So that's the fundamental role that CGIAR plays today. It's the promoters of the eugenics agenda hiding behind a multinational NGO.
Yeah, there's a great deal of evidence now accumulated. The industry and to an extent the American administration keep on pretending that there is no evidence of any harm ever having arisen from GMOs, from the growing or the consumption of GMOs. That's a lie, you know, I mean, there's no other word for it. There is a huge amount of evidence in the literature that shows that GMOs harm the environment, they harm insects and non-target insects, for example, both in the GMOs that are sprayed with Roundup, for example, and also Liberty, which is the other key chemical. I mean, there are two types of chemicals which are sprayed on herbicide-tolerant GM plants. So those are toxic chemicals, basically, which are sprayed onto these plants, and so residues of these toxic chemicals are going into the food supply. It's inevitable. So there is harm associated with those chemicals, and that's well documented, and especially glyphosate, which is now sprayed on a huge scale in America, for example, onto glyphosate tolerant plants, and of course in Brazil and Argentina, Paraguay, where GM soy is being grown. And those are very toxic chemicals, so it's inevitable that organisms are going to be damaged by them, including mammals, including ourselves. And also, of course, they harm soil organisms. There's a great deal of documented evidence now. As far as human safety is concerned, the problem that we always have, and it's an almost intractable problem, is that the owners of the GM patents, Monsanto, Syngenta, DuPont, they will not allow their seeds or the produce coming from their GMO fields or crops to be used by independent researchers. They put an absolute block on independent research. So all of the research that has been conducted into food safety, into the safety of GMOs, is controlled by the patent owners, by the big corporations themselves. They will not allow any independent research to be done. So for a start, we cannot trust their research, and I'm personally very distrustful, because I've seen one piece of evidence after another where scientific fraud has been committed, where they've actually cooked the evidence, they've twisted the evidence, and it's entirely under their control, because they won't allow independent researchers to do the research. They set the research parameters, they insist on being able to read the research results before they're published, and if they don't like them, then the research results never get published, they never see the light of day. So I'm entirely mistrustful of a system where the GM corporations control the research, publish the research, and choose the researchers. That is bound to lead to corruption.